Hello, my name is Ellie Fox, and today I'll be presenting Love Without Labels Queer Relationships and Social Change in Schitt's Creek. I'd like to talk about David and Patrick's relationship because it offers something rare in mainstream media. It is a queer love story that's not defined by trauma or conflict, but rather by connection, emotional honesty, and growth. Through a sociological lens, we'll look at how the relationship challenges heteronormativity and what it tells us about identity, intimacy, and social change. Schitt's Creek does something really special. Instead of treating queer love as a crisis or a plot twist, it treats it as something worth celebrating. The show asks what happens when a sitcom decides that a queer relationship doesn't need fixing, explaining, or justifying. It just exists. That shift opens up space for a different kind of storytelling, one that centers connection, softness, and everyday intimacy. And that's the perspective I want to explore as we move through this presentation. David and Patrick's relationship works on a level that goes deeper than just romance. Beneath the humor and all the sweet moments, there's a story about identity and belonging, and all the ways people grow when they feel safe to be fully themselves. Their relationship doesn't hinge on conflict or tragedy. Instead, it shows how queer love can unfold in everyday moments, in simple gestures, and in the space two people create for each other. That's really the heart of this project, looking at how the show uses an ordinary love story to challenge limiting narratives and imagine something more expansive. Before we look at Schitt's Creek, it helps to understand the broader landscape of queer representation in media. For many years, queer characters were either invisible or coded in ways that only certain viewers might recognize. When they did appear openly, their portrayals were usually limited to narrow stereotypes, such as gay men written as sissies and lesbians framed as masculine or predatory or deviant. Most queer storylines were centered on trauma or tragedy. Characters were written as damaged, at risk, or defined by struggle. And as queer visibility became more commercialized, representation became sanitized. Only respectable, market friendly identities were spotlighted, and typically those were white, affluent, and gender normative gay men, while everyone else was pushed out of view. These patterns shaped a very limited picture of what queerness looked like on screen. Understanding that context will help us see why the representation in Schitt's Creek stands out so much. Symbolic interactionism is a way for us to understand how meaning is created in everyday interactions. It reminds us that identities aren't fixed or formed in isolation. They take shape through the relationships we build and the small gestures we share with others. In David and Patrick's relationship, symbolism shows up in really subtle but powerful ways. For example, Patrick's open mic performance is not just a song, it's a gesture that communicates trust, affection, and emotional vulnerability. Moments like this show how intimacy is built through shared meaning and how relationships become a key space where people negotiate who they are with each other. Queer theory helps us look at how social norms shape the way relationships are understood and valued. It challenges the assumption that straight relationships are the default and everything else is an exception. When we use queer theory to look at Schitt's Creek, we can see how the show pushes back against those expectations. David and Patrick's relationship is presented as healthy, ordinary, and emotionally grounded without needing to be justified or explained. The show also avoids the trauma driven narratives that have historically dominated queer representation. Instead, it makes space for queer love to be soft, supportive, and unremarkable in the best possible way. That shift is part of what makes the relationship feel so significant. In this episode, Patrick performed a song, a serenade, for David in front of an audience. This moment is one of the first times that we see Patrick really open up emotionally. By choosing to perform this song in a public space, he's expressing affection, vulnerability, and a sense of commitment in a way that feels incredibly intimate. David's reaction, that mix of surprise, embarrassment, and being deeply moved, shows how meaningful this moment is for both of them. Sociologically, the setting matters. The performance happens in a community space surrounded by people who treat it as completely normal. There's no shock, no discomfort, no very special episode framing. It's just a tender moment between two people in love. That ordinariness pushes back against heteronormative expectations and reflects what symbolic interactionism helps us to see, that relationships are built through small, meaningful gestures that shape identity, trust, and connection. In this clip, Patrick is coming out to his parents, and the focus is entirely on that intimate family moment. This is where we see heteronormativity show up most clearly. His parents always assumed he was straight, and Patrick has always hesitated to come out to his parents because he was worried about their confusion or their questions and the emotional weight of correcting those assumptions. What's important here is that the scene doesn't turn into a dramatic confrontation or a traumatic storyline. Instead, it highlights the vulnerability involved in sharing a core part of your identity with the people who matter most. Patrick is careful, nervous, and honest, and his parents' reactions feel real and rooted in care. Sociologically, this moment shows how coming out is a relational process shaped by family expectations, cultural norms, and emotional labor. It emphasizes that queer identity isn't just personal, it's negotiated within families and social structures. When we look at David and Patrick's relationship through research on media and identity, we can see why this kind of representation matters so much. Studies show that authentic queer characters give viewers something they rarely had in the past, people to relate to, and models of identity that feel real. Gomillion and Giuliano found that media role models can support self-understanding and help LGBTQ people form a positive sense of self. And McKinroy and Craig's work shows that positive representation reduces stigma and increases feelings of belonging. Sender's research helps explain why this feels so different from earlier portrayals. Historically, the versions of queerness that made it onto screens were the narrow, respectable ones, usually white, affluent, and gender normative. Schitt's Creek broadens that picture by showing queer love as everyday, joyful, and emotionally rich. Henry and colleagues describe this as slantwise pedagogy, meaning that comedy can shift understanding not by preaching, but by presenting queer lives with warmth and ease. When viewers see queer intimacy portrayed without shame, it becomes easier to imagine futures where love and belonging are possible. Schitt's Creek matters because it shows queer love as something healthy, ordinary, and full of care. David and Patrick aren't framed as exceptions or symbols. They're just two people building a life together, and the show lets that be enough. Their relationship offers a model of intimacy that's grounded in mutual respect, emotional honesty, and support, which is something queer viewers haven't always been able to see on screen. By telling a story that centers joy instead of trauma, the show expands what queer family and belonging can look like. And for many viewers, seeing a relationship like this makes it easier to imagine futures where they're loved, supported, and fully seen. These are the sources that helped shape this project. Thank you very much for watching.